I always believed that the worst kind of betrayal was the one you never saw coming. The one that blindsides you, not because you were naive, but because you genuinely trusted someone with every piece of yourself. That was my mistake. I trusted my wife, Callie. For the last 9 years, I thought we had a solid marriage. Sure, we had our rough patches, but what couple doesn't? I worked long hours, she pursued her passions, and somewhere in between, we always found our way back to each other. At least, that's what I told myself. Looking back, there were moments, small, almost insignificant, where I felt something was off. She started spending more time on her phone, laughing at texts she never shared with me. Her weekend plans with friends became more frequent, and when she got dressed up for them, she looked like she was going on a date rather than a casual night out. But the worst part? The way she started treating me. It wasn't immediate. It was slow, like a creeping shadow stretching across our marriage. The affection faded. The warmth in her voice whenever she said my name was gone. Her touches, once effortless and loving, became obligatory at best. At night, she'd roll away from me, mumbling about being tired, and I convinced myself that I was imagining things. That maybe she was just going through a phase. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Friday evening, and I came home exhausted. Work had drained me, and all I wanted was to unwind, maybe have dinner with Callie and just exist in the comfort of our home. But as I walked in, the house was eerily quiet. No smell of dinner, no music playing, just silence. Then I noticed the note on the counter. Out with friends. Don't wait up. Love you. The words looked innocent enough, but I felt my stomach twist. Something was wrong. I don't know what made me do it, but I grabbed my phone and scrolled through social media. She had become more careful lately, posting less and keeping things vague. But that night, someone else made the mistake she never did. A mutual acquaintance had uploaded a photo from a fancy party across town. The venue was extravagant, crystal chandeliers, high ceilings, a place where people went to be seen. But my focus wasn't on the decor. It was on her. There she was, in the background of the picture, locked in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. But the way she looked at him, the way she smiled, leaned in, touched his arm, there was no mistaking what I was seeing. It was the way she used to look at me. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling my hands tremble. My mind screamed at me to stay home, to not go down this road, because once I did, there would be no turning back. But my heart, my gut, they told me I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. So I got dressed, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to that party. The venue was buzzing with people. Laughter, music, the clinking of champagne glasses, it was a celebration. But for me, it was a funeral. The death of my marriage, of my trust, of the life I thought I had. I scanned the room, heart pounding, until I spotted her. Callie stood near the grand staircase, wearing a deep red dress I had never seen before. She was radiant, her hair styled to perfection, looking every bit like a woman who was deeply desired. And beside her, gripping her waist like he had every right to, was him. I didn't recognize him. He was tall, well-dressed, confident. And from the way he whispered something in her ear that made her giggle, it was clear. This wasn't new. I could have walked away. I could have let it go, swallowed my pride, and confronted her later. But that's not who I am. If my world was going to burn, I wasn't going to do it in silence. And that's when I saw her, his wife. She stood near the bar, holding a glass of wine, staring at them with the same look I knew was etched across my own face. She wasn't just some clueless spouse enjoying a night out. She knew. And in that moment, we locked eyes. She tilted her head slightly, almost as if she was asking, "What are you going to do?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, squared my shoulders, and started walking toward her. This night wasn't going to end the way Callie thought it would. It was just beginning. As I made my way across the crowded ballroom, my mind raced. My emotions fought between rage and heartbreak, but the deeper, colder part of me, the part one had ignored for months, took control. I wasn't going to lose myself in anger. I wasn't going to scream or cause a scene. No, I was going to do something far more satisfying. The woman at the bar, his wife, watched me approach. She was composed, but I could see the tension in her grip on the wine glass, the way her nails dug into the delicate stem. She already knew what I was about to say. Maybe she had suspected for as long as I had. Maybe this night wasn't a revelation for her, but a confirmation. I stopped beside her and ordered a drink, keeping my eyes fixed on our spouses. They were laughing now, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind them. Without looking at me, she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. "So, which one are you?" I turned to her, meeting her eyes. "The husband." "And you?" She let out a short, humorless laugh. The wife. Silence stretched between us. I wanted to ask 100 questions. How long had this been going on? Did she know who made the first move? Had they done this before? But none of those answers would change what I had already seen. Instead, I took a slow sip of my drink and said, "How do you want to handle this?" She exhaled, setting down her glass. Well, I was considering throwing my drink in her face. But I think we can do better than that. For the first time that night, I felt something shift. I wasn't just a man being cheated on anymore. I was a man with an opportunity. So I smiled. I have an idea. The perfect entrance. We didn't need a big, dramatic plan. We didn't need to cause a scene. The truth itself was enough. I offered my arm to her, and she hesitated for only a moment before slipping her hand around my elbow. To anyone watching, we looked like just another well-dressed couple at the party. And that was exactly what I wanted. With deliberate steps, we walked toward them. Callie still hadn't seen me. She was too caught up in her conversation, and the hand resting far too comfortably on her hip. But the moment we were close enough, the woman beside me cleared her throat. "Callie," she said sweetly. Callie turned, her face lighting up at first, until she saw me. Her smile froze. Her entire body tensed, and for a split second, I could see her mind working, scrambling for an explanation. The man beside her, her lover, raised an eyebrow as he noticed the woman beside me. His reaction was slower. He didn't recognize me right away, but he definitely recognized his wife. "Oh," Callie finally managed. Her voice was an awkward mix of forced surprise and discomfort. I didn't know you'd be here." I smiled. Clearly. Her eyes darted between me and the woman on my arm. How do you two know each other?" This was the moment. The one I'd been waiting for. The one where I finally got to watch everything fall apart for her the way it had already fallen apart for me. I looked at the woman beside me. She looked at me. And then, with perfect timing, we both smiled. "I believe you already know my wife," I said. Silence. Absolute, perfect, crushing silence. Callie's face drained of color. Her lover, her boyfriend, stiffened, his mouth slightly open, as if his brain hadn't yet caught up with what was happening. And then, before anyone could say a word, his wife leaned in, lowered her voice, and said something that sent chills down my spine. "We need to talk." The aftermath. Callie's hands started shaking. I watched as she gripped the stem of her wine glass, her knuckles turning white. Her boyfriend's reaction was even more telling. He took a small step back, like he was suddenly realizing just how badly he had miscalculated. Callie started, but no words came out. The weight of the moment was crushing her. This wasn't a private argument at home. This wasn't some heated discussion behind closed doors. This was public. And worse, she wasn't in control of the narrative. She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "Actually, you don't have to say anything," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I already know enough." Her boyfriend's wife stepped forward, her eyes never leaving her husband. "We all know enough." The entire ballroom wasn't watching, but enough people were. The music played on, people kept dancing, but at least a dozen guests had noticed the tension, the way Callie looked like she was seconds from passing out. I turned to my unexpected ally. "Shall we?" She smiled, looping her arm through mine again. "We shall." And just like that, we left them standing there. Callie didn't follow. She didn't call out my name. She didn't chase after me with some desperate excuse. Because she knew. She knew it was over. And that was the moment I realized something. I wasn't the one losing anything that night. She was. We walked out of that ballroom without looking back. I didn't need to see Callie's face again to know what she felt: shock, panic, the slow, creeping realization that everything she had been hiding was now out in the open. But I wasn't thinking about her anymore. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was thinking about myself. About what I needed. About what came next. The woman beside me, Eliza, as she finally introduced herself once we reached the valet, was just as composed as I was trying to be. Her expression remained unreadable, though I could tell she was holding back a storm of emotions. Maybe she had suspected her husband was cheating but had never had proof. Maybe she had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. As we stood outside, the cool night air offering some relief from the suffocating heat of the party, she turned to me. "What now?" I exhaled. "I don't know. But I'm not going back in there." A small smirk touched her lips. "Good. Neither am I." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had just walked through the fire and made it out on the other side, burned, but not broken. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts before landing on the one I had been avoiding for weeks. My lawyer. I hadn't wanted to believe it would come to this. But there was no escaping the truth anymore. Callie and I were done. There was no salvaging something built on lies. As I stared at the screen, debating whether to call right then and there, Eliza spoke again. Do you want to go somewhere? I looked up, surprised. What? She shrugged. I don't know. A bar, a diner, anywhere that isn't here. I don't want to go home yet. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think I could use a drink. We got into my car, and as I drove, the weight of the night started to settle on me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and something else, relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to wonder. The worst had already happened, and now, all that was left was picking up the pieces. We ended up at a quiet bar a few miles away, a dimly lit place with old leather booths and a bartender who didn't ask questions. We slid into a booth, and after ordering our drinks, Eliza leaned back with a sigh. I should have known, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. He's always been good at hiding things. Guess I just didn't want to see it. I nodded, understanding that all too well. Same. I saw the signs. I ignored them. Thought maybe it was just a rough patch. I let out a dry laugh. Turns out the rough patch was just me being an idiot. She tilted her head, watching me. You're not an idiot. You trusted her. That's not a weakness. I wanted to believe that. But trust felt like a foreign concept now, something distant and unattainable. We talked for hours. Not just about our spouses, soon-to-be exes, but about life, work, things we had given up in our marriages. She used to paint, but stopped because her husband never appreciated it. I used to love hiking, but Callie always complained it was boring. Somewhere between the second and third drink, I realized something. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't just grieving. I was free. By the time I dropped Eliza off at her place, the weight on my chest had lifted just a little. She hesitated before getting out of the car. You'll be okay, she said, more as a statement than a question. I nodded. You will too. She smiled, a small, tired thing, and then she was gone. I sat in my car for a long time after that, staring at the empty passenger seat. Then, finally, I made the call. It was time to start over. The call to my lawyer was short and direct. I didn't need to explain much. He had handled enough divorce cases to know what came next. I told him I wanted everything done as quickly as possible. No long negotiations, no second chances. Whatever assets I had to let go of to be rid of Callie, I was ready to do it. Hanging up, I stared at my phone for a long moment, letting the finality of it sink in. It wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about closing a chapter of my life that I had spent years believing in. I had built a future with this woman, only to find out she had already started a different one behind my back. When I finally pulled away from the curb and drove home, the house felt different. It was the same space I had lived in for years, but it was hollow now, stripped of the illusion that had made it feel like home. Everything inside was still untouched, her shoes by the door, her perfume lingering in the air, but I knew none of it mattered anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the couch, replaying everything in my mind. Every moment I had ignored. Every excuse I had accepted. Every sign that now, in hindsight, was so obvious I felt like a fool for missing it. I thought about the late nights she claimed to be working. The way she had stopped saying, I love you, unless I said it first. How she had gradually pushed me to the fringes of her life while she built something new in the shadows. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the humiliation, knowing that she had been parading around with another man while I sat at home believing we were just going through a rough patch. But if she thought I was going to fall apart over this, she was wrong. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My first call was to a realtor. I wanted the house gone. I didn't care about the memories attached to it anymore. It was nothing but a monument to a lie. By noon, I had packed up most of my belongings. Anything that reminded me of her went straight into boxes that I planned to drop off at a storage unit. If she wanted her things, she could come get them herself. I wasn't going to waste another second on someone who had treated me like an afterthought. 2 days passed before she finally called. I didn't answer the first few times. I let her feel the silence, the absence of the man she had once counted on to always pick up, always be there, always forgive. On the 5th call, I finally picked up. Hello. My voice was calm. Steady. Nothing like the wreck she probably expected me to be. There was silence on the other end for a second, as if she had been preparing for a completely different version of me. Then, finally, she spoke. Can we talk? I let the question hang in the air for a moment before answering. About what? She exhaled, a soft, nervous sound. Us. There was no, I'm sorry. No attempt to explain. Just us, like she still had the right to claim me as part of some twisted version of a relationship that she had already destroyed. There's no us, Callie, I said flatly. Not anymore. Another pause. Then, a quieter voice. I don't know how things got so bad. I almost laughed at that. You don't. I never meant to hurt you, she continued, as if that somehow changed the reality of what she had done. I felt like we were drifting apart, and I cut her off. And instead of talking to me about it, you started sleeping with someone else? She had no answer for that. I wasn't interested in hearing whatever excuse she was about to manufacture next. I had spent enough time living in her lies. This isn't a conversation, Callie, I said. We're done. The papers will be sent to you soon. Sign them, and let's end this like adults. There was a long silence. And then, finally, a quiet, broken whisper. I didn't want it to end like this. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. You made that choice the moment you betrayed me. And with that, I hung up. For the first time since this entire nightmare started, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. I thought that would be the last time I ever had to hear Callie's voice. That hanging up on her would be the final act of closure I needed. But, as I was quickly learning, people like her don't just let go when things no longer suit them. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. My lawyer handled everything efficiently, and since I was more than willing to let go of the house and whatever else she wanted, there weren't many battles to fight. I just wanted out. I didn't care about shared assets, about who got what. She had already taken enough from me. But Callie? She wasn't as ready to let go. She called again a few days later, her voice softer this time, almost timid. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. I feel like we should at least sit down and talk in person, she said, as if she hadn't completely obliterated my trust in her. We owe each other that much. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. We don't owe each other anything, Callie. She hesitated. I need to explain. I almost laughed. Explain what? That you were cheating on me? That you brought your affair into our home, our life, while I was still stupid enough to believe in us. I don't need an explanation for that, Callie. I already know everything I need to know. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she finally understood how deeply she had broken everything. I made a mistake, she whispered. I was lost. I didn't know how to fix us. I shook my head, more to myself than anything. You didn't try to fix anything, Callie. You took the easy way out. You chose to betray me instead of facing the hard truth. There was silence on the other end. A long, drawn-out pause where I could almost feel her searching for the right thing to say. Then, her voice came out small. Do you think we could ever? No, I said before she could even finish the sentence. Her breath caught. I didn't let her continue. I'm moving on. You should too. And with that, I hung up again. For a while, it seemed like she finally got the message. The divorce papers were signed, the house was sold, and I packed up what little I needed to start fresh. I found a new apartment, something smaller, quieter, something that felt entirely my own. It was strange, starting over at this stage in my life, but there was also something freeing about it. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't someone's afterthought, someone's backup plan. I was just me. Months passed, and with every day that went by, I felt lighter. The ghost of Callie's betrayal faded bit by bit. I got back into the things I had neglected for years, hiking, traveling, even dating again, though I took it slow. I wasn't in a rush to fill the space she had left behind. And then, just when I thought she was gone for good, she came back. It was a regular Thursday evening. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, and was about to make dinner when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I ignored calls like that, but something told me to pick up. And then I heard her voice. Hey. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you want, Callie? A pause. Then, a quiet, shaky breath. Can we meet? I almost laughed. Why would I do that? I just need to talk to you, she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. It's important. Not my problem. Please, she whispered. There was something different in her tone this time. Not desperation, not manipulation, something else. Against my better judgment, I sighed. Where? She gave me an address, a small cafe on the other side of town. I could have ignored her. I should have. But something in me needed to know what she had to say. So, for the first time since our divorce, I agreed to see her. And I had no idea what I was about to walk into. I should have ignored her call. I should have let her voice disappear into the past, where it belonged. But curiosity, or maybe some lingering, masochistic part of me, drove me to that cafe. I arrived a few minutes early, not because I was eager to see her, but because I wanted to be the one waiting. I wanted her to walk in and see me calm, in control, unaffected by whatever she had to say. I wanted her to realize that I had moved on, that she no longer had a hold on me. When she finally entered, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Not in a dramatic way, but in the small details. The confidence she once carried, the same confidence she used to justify lying to me, deceiving me, was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. She spotted me, hesitated, then slowly walked over. I didn't stand. I didn't offer any pleasantries. I just watched as she slid into the chair across from me, nervously tucking her hair behind her ear. "Thanks for meeting me," she said quietly. I nodded but said nothing. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She fidgeted with the napkin in front of her, unfolding it, refolding it, stalling. "Just say what you need to say, Callie," I said, my voice even. She took a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. For what, exactly? For everything. Her eyes darted to mine, then away again. For lying. For betraying you. For throwing away everything we had. I didn't react. I had spent months working through my emotions, detangling the love I once had for her from the anger, the betrayal, the resentment. And now? Now, I felt nothing. "Okay," I said simply. She blinked. "Okay. Yeah. Okay. You apologized. Anything else?" Her face fell slightly, as if she had expected more, maybe an emotional reaction, maybe some sign that she still mattered to me. But she didn't. Not anymore. She swallowed hard. I miss you." I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head with a small, humorless chuckle. "You don't miss me, Callie. You miss what I gave you. You miss having someone who cared, who was always there. Someone who didn't make you feel disposable." Her eyes welled up, but I didn't care. "You made your choice," I continued, my voice unwavering. "You chose excitement over loyalty. You chose deception over honesty. And now that it's over, now that you've lost everything, you want to come back." I shook my head. "It doesn't work like that." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "I was stupid," she whispered. "I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "And now that it's gone, you think you can just say sorry and everything will be fine?" She swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to take me back. I know I don't deserve that. But I just needed you to know that I regret it. Every day. I wake up and wonder how I could have done that to you. To us." I stared at her for a long moment. And then, finally, I said the words that had been sitting on the edge of my mind since the day I walked away. "I forgive you." Her breath hitched, her lips parting slightly in shock. She hadn't expected that. Maybe she had expected anger, hatred, or maybe even a cold indifference. But forgiveness? That was something she hadn't prepared for. "But that doesn't change anything," I continued. "Forgiving you doesn't mean I want you back. It doesn't mean I forget what you did. It just means that I refuse to let your choices weigh me down anymore." She nodded slowly, wiping at her face. "I understand." I finished the last sip of my coffee and set the cup down. Good. A heavy silence settled between us. This was it, the real ending. Not the messy, emotional wreckage she had left me in, not the legal battles or the late-night phone calls. This was the true moment of closure. I stood up. "Take care of yourself, Callie." She looked up at me, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret. Sorrow. Maybe even a sliver of understanding. "You too," she whispered. And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back. Not this time. Walking out of that cafe felt like closing the last door to my past. I expected to feel some kind of relief, a weight lifting off my shoulders. Instead, I felt nothing. Not emptiness. Not sadness. Just nothing. It was strange. I had spent months dealing with the wreckage of my marriage, replaying every memory, every conversation, every moment that had led to this. I had imagined all the different ways this could have ended: screaming, anger, maybe even some twisted attempt at reconciliation. But instead, it ended with a quiet, defeated goodbye. Maybe that was the only way it could have ended. As I walked to my car, I took one last glance at the cafe through the window. Callie was still sitting there, staring at the table, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her coffee cup. She looked lost, smaller than I had ever seen her. That used to be my problem. I used to be the one who made her feel better when she was sad. I used to be the one who reassured her when she felt uncertain. But not anymore. She wasn't my responsibility. I got in my car and drove away without a second thought. That should have been the end of it. And for a while, it was. Life moved on. The divorce was final, and with every passing week, Callie became less and less of a thought in my mind. I focused on myself, on rebuilding a life that had nothing to do with her. I started traveling again, something I hadn't done in years. I went hiking, reconnected with old friends, even started dating casually, not because I was searching for something serious, but because I wanted to remind myself that I could. The past was over. Until, 2 years later, she came back. It was a random Saturday when I got the call. An unknown number popped up on my phone. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Hello. Silence. And then, a voice I hadn't heard in a long, long time. Hi. I pulled the phone away from my ear, checking the number again. It wasn't saved in my contacts, but I knew who it was. Callie, I said flatly. A small, nervous breath on the other end. I wasn't sure if you'd answer. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my mind already racing. I almost didn't. A soft, awkward laugh. Yeah. I figured. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. She hesitated, then finally said, I heard about the divorce. I frowned. You were the divorce. No, I mean. I heard that you're single. That stopped me for a second. What? She cleared her throat. Someone mentioned that you never remarried. That you aren't seeing anyone seriously. I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my face. Why does that matter to you? A pause. Then quietly, because I was hoping we could talk. I almost laughed. We already did. I know, she rushed out. I know we did. But I've changed. I shook my head. Callie. Please, she whispered. Just one conversation. No expectations, no pressure. I need to see you. I should have said no. I should have told her that she was just another ghost from my past, another mistake I had long since buried. But something in her voice was different. Not desperation. Not manipulation. Something else. Against my better judgment, I sighed. Fine. One conversation. She let out a shaky breath, almost like she hadn't expected me to agree. Thank you. I didn't respond. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. Because if there was one thing I had learned in the last 2 years, it was this. Sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. And I needed to know why she had come back now. I agreed to meet her. Not because I thought there was anything left between us. Not because I wanted closure. I already had that. But because I needed to see for myself that she was just a part of my past now. That whatever she wanted, whatever she was hoping for, it wouldn't shake the life I had built without her. We met at a quiet park on a Sunday afternoon. It was the kind of place we used to go to years ago, back when we were still us. Back when I thought we had forever. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree. She looked different. Not just in the way time had changed her, but in the way she carried herself. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone, replaced by something softer. I sat down beside her, leaving enough space between us to make it clear this wasn't a reunion. This was just a conversation. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Thanks for coming. I nodded, waiting. She took a deep breath. I know I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your time, or your patience, or even this conversation. But I needed to see you. I exhaled, watching the breeze move through the trees. Why now, Callie? She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. Because I spent the last 2 years trying to outrun my mistakes. Trying to pretend like I didn't throw away the best thing I ever had. And no matter what I did, no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the truth. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. I hurt you in ways I can never take back. I was selfish. I was blind. And I lost the only person who ever truly loved me. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I know you've moved on, she continued, her voice softer. And I'm not here to ask for anything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to, she swallowed hard. I just wanted to tell you that I see it now. I see everything I took for granted. And I just hope you're happy. I studied her, waiting for the catch. The plea. The hidden motive. But there was none. For the first time, Callie wasn't trying to manipulate me. She wasn't trying to rewrite history or make excuses. She was just letting go. And maybe that was exactly what I needed. I nodded slowly. I am happy. Her lips trembled slightly, but she smiled. Good. You deserve to be. Silence stretched between us. Not the heavy, painful kind. Just quiet understanding. I stood up first, brushing off my hands. Take care of yourself, Callie. She looked up at me, eyes shining with something I didn't need to name. I will, she whispered. And that was it. No dramatic ending. No second chances. No lingering regret. I walked away feeling lighter than I ever had before. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was walking toward a life that was entirely my own. And I was finally, truly free.